Pari, and really exciting conversation so far. We'll keep that going on. So moving to our next segment, as we promised, we have an exciting fireside chat coming up between Pari and our esteemed guest, Mr. Ravi Venkatesan. Ravi is a business leader, author, and social entrepreneur. He is currently UNICEF's special representative for young people and innovation. He's also the founder of Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship and serves on the boards of Hitachi Limited and Rockefeller Foundation. Ravi was the chairman of Microsoft India, Bank of Baroda, and Cummins India. Ravi has recently authored the book, What the Heck Do I Do with My Life? How to Flourish in Our Turbulent Times. The book makes the case that successful adaptation in the new century requires a paradigm shift, a different mindset, new skills, and new strategies. Ravi also reflects on how we will need to live life more intentionally, making deliberate choices about who we are, what we do, and how we live. Today's panel discussion will unearth some of these insights captured in the book, as well as be an opportunity for us to learn from Ravi's real-life experiences. Like we mentioned earlier, please keep putting in your questions in the chat, and we'll take them as appropriate. I'll hand it over to Pari and Ravi for the panel discussion.
Hi, Ravi. I'm not able to see Ravi on video.
Why is that? Hi, Pari.
Hi, okay.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you now. Hi, Ravi, how are you?
Hey, good. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I was eavesdropping on the previous conversation, and it's great to see lots of old friends. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, congratulations again on your second book. I'll jump in. Why did you choose to write this book? What the heck do I do with my life during the COVID pandemic? Especially people are all already depressed during pandemic.
Yeah, so here's the book. And I hope at least some of them got their copies in time, Pari, and thank you for generously sending out a few copies. So the book came out, about a month ago, but it's actually 2 years late. So my deal with the publisher was actually to get it out there in early 2020. And so it wasn't some grand design of timing it with COVID and so forth. But, you know, it's a very fortuitous accident that it came out when it did, because it seems to be a question that's of great interest and to a lot of people, particularly as we're, 2 years into this pandemic. And the reason very simply was, I began writing after I left Microsoft. I began writing much more. And some of the topics I wrote on really resonated. For instance, I talked about in 2013, I wrote some series in ET, and I think it's called The Fear of Being Nobody was the title. And much to my surprise, over 1 million people read it, and I'd get on an airplane and somebody would come up and say, "Are you the guy who wrote that article?" They didn't know anything else, but that's what was important. Then as LinkedIn became more popular, I started writing more of these kinds of things on LinkedIn. There was one in which I think was about 5 years ago that I wrote, says the IT party is over, reinvent yourself or die, or something like that. And man, it's going strong today. It's got some 3 million views. And so through this, I realized that there's this great appetite for the broader question of, what do I do with my life? How do I make better choices? And there's a lot of anxiety, and of course, exacerbated by the pandemic. There's a lot of confusion. And I think people are looking for help. And the scalable way is to put your ideas together in a book, even though I realize very few people actually buy or read books. But it's pretty handy for organizing your own thoughts and ideas, and then having a calling card. But the way you get your ideas across is essentially through lots of conversations like today.
Great. Ravi, one of the things, you said you eavesdrop on this session, and we talked about the zero cost difference mindset as a concept, right? And I got that idea from reading your book. And one of the themes in your book is about mindset. And you say mindset is the app of your life. What is a big insight around mindset? What triggered that? Why do you start the book with that?
I started the book with that because over the years I've been, you know, looking at the issue of, you know, the divergence of our fortunes. You know, you go back to your batch at IIT or, you know, various colleges and schools, and it's interesting to see what happened 20 years, 30 years later. Those you thought were going to set the world on fire didn't do much. The 5.0 ended up doing something astonishing, like Chetan Bhagat. But so, you know, there's no correlation. Then you look at, why does somebody who has every reason to be happy, why is she unhappy? Why does somebody who has nothing, why are they sort of delirious? You know, and so on and so forth. And the more I read and thought about it, and I came down to this conclusion that mindset plays the biggest role in all these things. It determines what, you know, what we want, what we seek to achieve and strive for, and whether we get there or not. It determines how we interact with the world and manifest the way we, whether we, you know, end up having happy lives or not. And so I decided to put a whole chapter together. In fact, it's the first substantive chapter. And of course, people like Satya, Nadella, and others have talked a lot in recent years about the growth mindset, which is one aspect of it. But really, the idea is simple. Our assumptions, beliefs, the stories we have in our mind, mostly implicit about everything, about ourselves, what we're capable of, not capable of, what is success, what is failure. You know, is the world fair or not? Is Pari a good guy or not? These are all assumptions we have, and this determines, you know, how we think about things and so forth. And so, in fact, I have two nice quotes out there. I quote an old one from Bill Gates who says, "What we believe is what we achieve." And I believe that to be so true. And then even more powerful is Henry Ford, who says, "Whether you think you can or whether you think you cannot, you're right." Okay. So I explore
Any
what is
application of that as it's a thought experiment in your mindset, in your life?
Yeah, but again, the beautiful thing about mindset is once you're conscious, you can change your beliefs and assumptions. And when you change your beliefs and assumptions, your reality changes. So I give very specific instances of how, and I saw Ram out there, Ram Narayan. Ram knows that, 15 years ago, I was quite a pessimist. I had this great opportunity to see a glass always half empty or 2/3 empty. And then at some point you realize and say, look, optimism is much better than pessimism. First, optimists achieve more, they're happier, and others are happier being around them. So I very consciously decided to change myself. And it turns out that optimism or pessimism is based on three assumptions. When something doesn't go well, do you tend to immediately believe the worst possible outcome? Do you believe it's short-term or lifelong? And whether you think this bad thing that's happening is personal. Why is this happening to me? As opposed to, it just happened. And so you can catch yourself and work yourself out of it. I talk about how I was just the most dreadful people manager when I first started in my early 20s. And it got to the point where both my workers, it was a factory, and I would just be in tears on a Monday morning because neither of us wanted to be there for the week. And so we couldn't go on like this. But so I examined my beliefs about people, and I talk about how you change them. So the beautiful thing is, if you are aware, you can actually catch where your beliefs are actually not helping you and change it.
Great. Thanks for that insight and your personal example. And you also talk a lot about leadership in the book, right? Different approaches to leadership. And if you distill that, like how should leaders in this call think about leadership in the next decade? What is that one or two things they should do different?
Well, let me deliver a set of messages on leadership, which I think are important. And I hope some of you will read the chapter on leadership. First of all, I think it is the biggest issue of our times. Okay, it is the central issue of our times. because if you look at the world, it's actually fairly worrying. Okay. One of the best things about being intensely busy, like all of you, is you can filter out the world. But, you know, unfortunately, I made a different choice. So I think a lot of time about the world, and whether you look at what's going on globally, what's going on in India, all this nonsense in Karnataka colleges, what's happening in your local community. And you see all these problems, but you also see that there are solutions, there are resources, there's talent, but the problems aren't getting solved, they're getting bigger. And the reason is we don't have leaders in positions of power and authority who are actually doing something about it. You look at your own organizations, every company I know has an abundance of opportunity. Sure, it has challenges, but it has more opportunities and more resources, and constrained more by talent, which we just heard, who can make things happen. And so, look, I think the number one change we need to see is we need to stop conflating leadership with title, you know, like vice president or GM or what. These are titles. It has nothing to do with leadership. Some of the people occupying these positions are the antithesis of what leadership is all about. They're arch bureaucrats and politicians. Leadership instead is an act. It's a verb, not a noun. And therefore, you know, if you're going to be successful, we need many, many more people, including all of us, to act like leaders. Okay. And so that's the essence of the chapter on leadership. And also, I say that this is the uber skill. Okay, if you're worried about a job or, you know, employment or opportunities, then work on becoming a more effective people leader. Because if you are good at leading people by influence, people are going to come to you. Okay, because it's in such short supply. So it is the most sort of the Brahmastra of all skills, if you will. Anyway, I can go on and on and on because it's my favorite subject. And, you know, Pari, I give examples of just really ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I talk about Padma Shri, who's one of my neighbors in Koramangala, and how she's, you know, from a housewife, become the leading waste warrior of Bangalore. I could talk about this young kid in a slum in Ahmedabad who's doing amazing things, Rehan Sheikh, and so on. And nobody gave these people a mandate to go do the things they are doing. And they come from, you know, modest backgrounds. And so it's a very empowering idea that there is leadership potential in every one of us.
I think it's very interesting. The leadership act is a verb than a noun, and it can come from anywhere. A lot of people in this call have thousands of people working for them, and in truly what you're saying is each of them could potentially be a leader, and the way they behave, it has to be the act should be leadership. And the other, I'm just jumping into different points in the book, which I found fascinating. And you have this concept of a portfolio life, right? So I found it very interesting because a lot of people get stuck in a career path, and they do this for 40 years, and in between they get very scared if they have to do something else. But what do you mean by a portfolio life? We know a portfolio of products, but what do you mean by portfolio of life, and how do one go about building that?
Well, the thing to realize is when you find a good job, you know, good work in a good company, it actually gives you a lot of what you need to be happy, not just a paycheck. In fact, the paycheck may be the smaller of the things that a good job gives you. It gives you community, you know, where you work for 12 hours a day. You often make a lot of good friends. It gives you your identity. So, you know, most of the time you introduce yourself within a few nanoseconds by what you do. I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, I'm an architect, I'm a manager, or whatever. It gives you opportunities to learn and grow. It gives you things, the satisfaction of solving things and being rewarded and recognized. All these psychological benefits come from work. So work is incredibly central and important for our well-being. Now, I am of the opinion that jobs of the sort that we all have had, or many of you have, are going to be for fewer and fewer people. There are many reasons we can talk about in the sort of evolving nature of work, which suggests that sooner rather than later, most of us are going to have to be self-employed. Okay. If for no reason other than we're living much longer and therefore we want to be active and productive into our 70s, if not our early 80s. And of course, no one's interested in having a 70-year-old GM. So as you move from being this employee to being learning to stand on your own feet, one of the things you have to solve for is all these things. Okay, so how do I get paid for some of my skills? Where do I go and find my community? What is my identity? So how do I learn? How do I make a difference? So what you need to do is experiment and find a variety of activities or things that you're immersed in, each of which gives you different satisfaction. So you just, in the introduction, I think, someone introduced me and said, oh, Ravi does these things. So if you look at my portfolio, well, a lot of it, 80% is now in the social sector with GAME, UNICEF, and then something new in climate change. And that gives me intellectual sort of engagement to solve complex problems, get some satisfaction. Occasionally, you make a small dent in something. Hitachi keeps me grounded in still the private sector, which I enjoy, and pays the bills. Okay, so then there's my writing and teaching and speaking, which gives me a tremendous amount of joy. So, I've arranged my life so that 4 or 5 things collectively what gives me what one beautiful job would have given. And so in my book, I have a whole section on, as you begin to think about your transition, how do you experiment your way and evolve gradually a portfolio of things? And of course, the portfolio evolves. My portfolio 5 years ago is very different, so it's dynamic. So this is kind of the idea.
So how do you break out of the pattern? You have been in some of the most successful roles one could play in India, right? And then you chose not to do it, and you chose this portfolio approach. And I think your portfolio approach, you would have experimented. In the book you talk about, you experimented several things and you picked a few things you like. And a lot of people in this call, they're all in the same kind of roles, right? They've reached the peak of what they could do in their companies in India. How would they get out of the, there is also a fear that, hey, what do I do now? And then they continue to stay in that role for a longer time and then being a glass ceiling for the rest of the people coming in, right? So how do they break the pattern?
Well, first of all, if you're loving and enjoying what you do, there's no problem. Keep doing it, okay? There's no need to hunt for an issue when none exists. So I think, but there will come a time when one of two things happen. Either life gives you a poke in the butt and says, and that can happen in many ways. You can get reorganized and your job goes away. You get a manager who you don't like anymore or whatever it is. So life can change and then you have to go out and look. Or else, as Steve Jobs said in his famous Stanford speech, too many mornings you get up in a row and you say, what the heck am I doing? It just doesn't give me joy anymore. And then you realize, okay, I've climbed a hill and I thought this hill was going to be great. I've reached the top and it no longer gives me the jollies. And then I look around me and there's so many bigger hills and there's so many more successful people. So, there's no end to this. And so you have to reinvent yourself. And most important thing is you have to find new purpose. Now that's easy to say and difficult to do. So I talk about the situation where the only thing you're clear about is you don't want to do what you're doing, but you have no idea what else you could do. And that's when, Pari, I talk about how you do lots of micro experiments. Okay, you try different things which you believe are, potential pathways, and then you see what fits. And I described my own adventures at 2 different points in the last decade. And not everything you try will work out, and you learn a lot about yourself. And then eventually you come to this new state. You find your new state, you find purpose, etc. So it's not that hard. It may feel a little scary in the beginning, not even scary, uncomfortable. But the thing to learn about that discomfort is not to wish it away. the discomfort actually has the most important clues about who you are. And, and if you sit down with your discomfort and lean into it, you learn a lot about yourself. So it's a great process. And if you don't choose to do it, it's going to happen to you.
If you don't do it, it'll anyway happen to you. So it's better to control the timing.
I think so.
And another concept you talk about in the book is, it's a little bit counterintuitive. You say that one should not chase opportunities, but attract them. It's kind of contradictory, right? The traditional way of thinking is, if you want something, you be proactive about it, go ask for it.
Yeah, it is a bit contrarian, but I give the example. Say there's a mouse that enters your kitchen or your apartment. And I said, unless you're a cat, you can't catch it by running it down. You can't chase it and catch it. Okay. So what do? We put a little tasty food out there and, wait for it to come to you, and then you do something. And I think it's the same with opportunities. In today's world, this thing about going and applying for jobs, chasing opportunities is going to be very difficult. I think it's, far, far more a successful strategy is to make yourself irresistible so that people are beating up path to you and pounding on your door. Opportunities are coming to you. So I say things, marketing, not sales. Okay. And so how do you do that? And a lot of the ways in which you do that is by building what I call intangible assets. So for instance, how do you build your reputation in a good way? So, people are drawn to you when they think about an issue. How do you build your networks in a very intentional way? And, so that's a second thing. How do you make sure that you have expertise that is still relevant? So these intangible assets make a bigger difference over time than your tangible assets. And so how do you get intentional and cultivate it is important. Now, one of the exercises I get people to do might be interesting for others to do tonight, is I say, make a list of how the most important opportunities or people entered your life, okay? Particularly in the last 20 years, may not be the earliest years. And then you look at each of those things. Oh, I'm at VMware. How did that happen? I'm doing this or doing that. How did it happen? And if you get honest about it, very few of the ones will be because you chose to go pursue something. Very high likelihood that, except for the earlier ones, you said, I must go to IIT or whatever, and worked hard and got in. Over the years, the people who enter your life, the opportunities that enter your life are attracted into it. And it's not because of some mysticism. It's because of reputation, networks, and intangible assets. Okay. So anyway, there's a great deal out there in the book in case somebody wants to unpack it.
Got it. And Ravi, one final question on others. If you have questions, please, raise your hand and we'll get to that. One final question from my side. Going back to the leaders in this call, right? Most of them are on the peak of their, career and what they can do in India. And for many of them, they have to go back to the headquarters for them to grow. But how can they expand their portfolio here in India? What's your advice to them?
Well, first of all, talking on mindset, I would absolutely say you're not at the peak of anything. Okay, the peak is still ahead of you. So, I just turned 59. And, in the traditional way, this is about the time you should be slowing down. And, but if anything, I'm accelerating. Okay. I'm just about to take a giant new adventure in the energy space. And energy is something I know nothing about. Okay. And so in my view, everything I've ever done and learned over these 59 years is only preparation for what is to come next. And this is a mindset or framing issue, Pari. So I think all the good people in this room still have enormous headroom for growth, impact, and all that. Now to your more narrow question. Look, if you define yourself in terms of climbing the ladder in your organization, then at some point you will have to go back to headquarters. I've seen this tape too many times. And, not only because the opportunities tend to be closer to headquarters, also because the politics, out of sight, out of mind. And so if you want to be considered, if you want to be influencing major decisions, you need to be, Bill Gates used to say, I should be able to shout and you should be able to hear it. So, you have to be around the center of power. Sometimes you can get a little more headroom by taking on a global role out of India. And I think many people are trying to do that. And so you can be intrapreneurial and go down. But at some point, you're still going to hit a ceiling. And there you have two choices. One is you say, fine, this is a good job. I'm enjoying it. It's a great company. I still like the work and the mission, but I have more bandwidth and I want to grow in some other ways. So you take on projects, you start building your portfolio beyond your company. So Rajan Anandan, for instance, when he used to work with me, he was doing a lot of his angel investing, and that was happening side by side with Microsoft and Google. And then eventually that became his next thing. So you can do that, or you can do what sooner or later you're going to have to do. Stop defining your life and career in terms of just this company. I saw Microsoft as just a project, and I wasn't sure whether it's going to be a 2-year project. It ended up being an 8-year project, but all of these are projects. So you can start thinking about life on a much bigger canvas.
Got it. So your career, what you are doing it's really a project, right? It's not saying that it's something I do for my life.
That's right. It's actually a series of what I call SCurves. And so
it's like a product SCurves. Interesting. Okay. So it's great. So I will stop here with my questions and take questions from here. Prasad from Akamai, go ahead.
Hello. Hey, Pari, why don't we take 2-3 at a time and then I respond? That might be a more efficient way of.
Okay. All right. Prasad, go ahead.
Yeah, this may be a heavy one, Ravi. Great book. I went through it like homework for this session and reached the last 20 pages, so I'll be honest. But it does resonate a lot, and thank you for the practical advice as center heads here. I think that also resonates a lot. One question that popped in my mind when I was reading this is, does this appeal and does it get absorbed more by privileged folks like us who have reached a certain point in our career and hence, have the time to wherewithal to sit and think about this project in SCurve versus younger folks? And I'm imagining myself 15 years ago, too busy having kids, everything happening, career and personal life. What's been your experience about response from that kind of a set of people? I just wanted to understand.
Cool. So do you want to take a couple more and then?
Yeah, Arjun, go ahead.
Ravi, your personal experience and opportunity at Cummins, where you couldn't have been pushed more out of your comfort zone, clearly has shaped a lot of your future, and also shaped your comments about leadership development programs, that most of them are useless and really the best way is to immerse people into the biggest problems that you need to solve. So that's a very humbling thought after 30 years of trying to develop our teams and our leaders. So could you just share a little bit more about how you think we can be effective in really developing the leaders in our teams?
Beautiful. And by the way, AR and I go back 35 years, don't we? No, 40 years. Good grief, you're dating us. Okay, maybe we'll start with these two. Prasad, first of all, one of the things I say is this question of what do I do with my life has a way of popping up at multiple stages. It pops up when you're a student and you're trying to make your first choices. What do I study? Do I go abroad? Do I take up a job? What kind of job? All that. It tends to pop up again, in your 30s or even 40s. You're intensely busy for a while, but then one day you wake up and you're saying, look, am I heading down the right path? You read about, all kinds of people doing all kinds of interesting things. So some of them becoming unicorns and so on and so forth. And particularly by mid-40, there's this sense of life is passing me by and I better figure out quickly or I'm going to get left behind. That midlife crisis comes in. It happens again when you're turning 50, where you see the glass ceiling, or you really, really don't enjoy what you're doing anymore, except it's nobody else is particularly interested in hiring you. And then it as we live longer, it pops up in your 60s, 70s, etc. And so the context is different, the answers are different, but the question keeps popping up. So, I do a lot of my work with young people because of UNICEF and also because of GAME. So the other day I was talking with Amish Tripathi of that Shiva series and all that, with lots and lots of young people. And that too, it was through an NGO. So they were young people who could barely speak English and tough socioeconomic backgrounds, and they asked tons of these questions. Obviously, the nature of our conversation was very different, but they're also interested in what should I do? How do I become successful? So I think this question is relevant to very large sort of numbers of people. And the answers are, of course, profoundly, profoundly different, which is why it was so hard to write this book, because, each person's situation, context, pathway, etc., is so different. And so I finally said, look, my aim is not to give any answers. My aim is only to get you to think intentionally about these issues, and then you'll figure out what fits and what doesn't, and you'll find your own answers. AR, so thank you for asking that question. Look, most of these leadership development programs and almost all the companies I've been associated with over the years are completely worthless, okay? And there are many reasons why they're worthless. One of them is, we tend to focus on high potentials. And my own experience was, one year I'm high potential, next year we missed some number and you weren't high potential anymore. The chap is still the same. And Ram knows this very well. And then, of course, I start my book with an interesting quote from Carol Dweck. And she says, a person's true potential is unknown and unknowable, and it is impossible to foresee what can be accomplished by years of passion, blah, blah, blah. So I've come to believe that, yeah, this idea that we know how to assess potential is flawed fundamentally. Number two, we confuse performance with potential. And number three, there is this fatal idea of ready now. Oh, is Ravi ready for Arjun's role? No, not yet. Why? Well, he doesn't have executive presence and enough global experience. Okay, so let's give him that feedback and hope something happens. 3 years later, is Ravi ready? No, he's fallen even further behind. So let's go out and hire someone. Okay, so the only way I have seen people get ready is by throwing them into the deep end, and they grow by stretching themselves to accomplish the role. So, I was phenomenally unqualified for every one of the roles I've ever done. And I became somewhat of a leader, largely because somebody took a bet on me and I tried hard to be successful, and things eventually generally worked out. So I'm a big fan of these crucible experiences. And how do you throw people into these life-changing crucible experiences? If you reflect on your own lives and careers, the reason you're here is along the way you had, either because you chose or life threw you into a crucible, and you grew. And you grew in leadership capability and self-confidence and some skills and all that. And the trick is, how do you do that at scale intentionally with large numbers of people? And at Bank of Baroda, which is one of the toughest environments to try all this, we demonstrated profound success, profound success. In fact, the only lasting thing that Jay and I did was grow lots of leaders.
Thanks, Ravi. We'll take a few more questions. Ruchi? Ruchi, you had a question?
Yes. Hi, Ravi. Ravi, thank you for writing the first one, the win in India, win anywhere. That's been sort of a Bible for us. And the second one also, I'm almost through the last 20 pages, like someone mentioned before. So my question is, you write about geography is destiny. And you're talking to a group of leaders who are based out of India. And you also spoke about movement to headquarters and, all of us sensing a glass ceiling and being closer to the power center. So what do you talk about? What's your viewpoint on geography is destiny with respect to career and, just lay a lens on how India is poised for some of these exciting roles in the future?
There are so many questions that you have cleverly intertwined.
Sorry.
It's multiple questions. Yeah, I do, but the idea that geography is destiny is not mine. It's 13th century by an Arab scholar called Ibn Khaldun, and nothing has really changed. So I read many interesting articles in the course of writing this book on luck, okay? And it's interesting that 70 or 75% of the income differences between people globally is explained by just where you were born. So if you're born in Switzerland versus Afghanistan, that pretty much shapes a lot of your life. And then, so, I also then go on to say, look, I think places matter greatly. And you're seeing this on a global basis, right? You look at the US and you see economic activity highly concentrated on the coast and around certain cities. Sure, with the pandemic, there is some dispersion going on, but still it is very, very concentrated. You see the same thing here. And that's not an accident. The very good reasons why this is so. And one of the most important reasons is actually something very few of us think about. It is the values of a city or a place, okay? So the values of a Gurgaon are different from the values of, say, Bangalore, which is different from Bay Area. But there's some things that they have in common, and I talk about modern values. One of the important modern values is, do you believe anybody has potential? Everybody has potential. Ruchi is capable of building a great business. Pari is capable of inventing something important. Or do you have to be male, Hindu, Brahmin, from IIT, or some little group in order to be able to do these things? And in Bangalore, to a very great extent, we don't care about these things, okay? Everybody is out there trying something. Some will succeed. Some will succeed later. So you want to be in a place that has, by and large, embraced some of these modern values, because in many other places where these are absent, it's never going to change, okay? You can have some industrial activity, but it's not going to change. And sorry, Pari, I'm going to go on a little bit here. These are important forums to get ideas across. Now in GAME, we're doing a lot of work in Ludhiana. Okay, we're trying to encourage existing SMEs to grow fast and using that success to inspire new people to come in. And then sort of 1.5 years later, I'm ready to pull my hair out in despair, not because there aren't a lot of businesses there. It's because the value system is not helping entrepreneurship of the sort that we all tend to recognize and appreciate. For instance, they're incredibly hierarchical, okay? And the feudal system is still alive. And the way you treat your workforce is just unbelievable. It's like Dickensian, okay? So when you have this, it's very hard to grow. So this is why I say, pick your city based on values. And I think it's going to become even more crucial decision as the world becomes a more polarized and hate-filled place, okay? And you just have to read some of what's going on around us to be fairly concerned and alarmed. So that's all I say. And, if I were to live my life all over, and if I were to give advice, I'd say, look, pick the place and then do the best you can. Okay, that's a far better strategy. So in terms of, should you go back to your headquarters? Hey, if you're happy here, there's no shortage of opportunities. Just don't limit your canvas. Think about a bigger canvas.
Thank you, Ravi.
So we have Arvind then from ANZ.
Thanks, Pari. Firstly, congratulations and thank you so much for organizing this session. It sort of was very consoling for me that ANZ is not the only company which is going through these challenges, especially the attrition. So I felt a bit happy that most of us are in the same boat, so attracting the talent and whatnot. So quite happy. And the second part, Ravi, thank you so much for taking this time, your valuable time for us. And here's my question to you. There's a lot of talk about servant leadership versus a traditional leadership. And whilst I've not gone through in detail your book, this is sort of catching up in a big way in terms of making sure you bring the company along and the staff along, the people along the journey, as opposed to a traditional command and control and assertive leadership. I just wanted to pick your thoughts on this, of how this is sort of going to play out in the coming years.
Well, first of all, that latter, the command and control, is not leadership. It's a very, as I said, 19th century or early 20th century understanding of what leadership. It is conflating leadership with power, authority, title, and these things. That's not going to work anymore. Why is that not going to work anymore? Well, to some extent, because more and more of our problems are interdisciplinary, and very often to solve the problems, you need to collaborate not only with multiple parts within the organization, but also multiple organization and cross-sector even. All my work is cross-sector. And nobody has the stature or authority that somebody should listen to you because they have to, okay? So all of us are going to have to become much more capable of leading by influence and without formal authority. And I think those of you who lead these matrix organizations or live in matrix organizations live reality every day, okay? That dude doesn't have to listen to you. How do you make her or him do something? It takes influence, right? So this is a very different leadership style, and I suspect more and more and more of that is going to be required. If you think about the fact that more companies are going to have a smaller core of permanent employees and rely on talent, which is more dispersed with different types of contracts, flexible arrangements, remote, etc., it becomes even more important. So this idea of servant leadership is not just a moral thing. Oh, you should be humble and, you know, invert the pyramid. And it's now becoming a compelling necessity. So if you look at all the things I do today, okay, and you know, most of them I'm responsible, and in no case do I have any formal authority. Right? In UNICEF, for instance, I have a very nice title. It's called Special Representative for Young People. But I decided not to join UNICEF as an employee, because then you get into the bureaucracy and all that. So I nicely arranged the thing where I sit on the fence. I take a salary of $1, and I get to only influence people. Okay. Nobody reports to me. I have no signing or decision-making authority, but yet we have had very good success mobilizing lots of millions of people around the world and raising millions of dollars for this. It's influence, okay? And you have to, so I talk about the lady in Koramangala called Padma Shri, who's the waste warrior of Bangalore. She doesn't have one person reporting to her, has no formal authority. The faster we learn to do this, the more wildly successful we're going to be.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ravi. There's a question from Tarun. Go ahead, Tarun.
Hi, Tarun.
Hi, Ravi. Good to see you. Thanks, Pari, for organizing this as well. I have a simple question, and I'll give an example. So first of all, I got your book. My kids are reading it as well. My 7-year-old just turned 8 yesterday, is trying to get and read it. We got inspired by a few things, and I think we are now into homeschooling for the first time. We're going to do things differently as well. The question, Ravi, and the insight I would love to get from you is, and I don't know exactly how to word it, but on a regular basis, what is your inspiration to increase your canvas, to have either a major impact or to live the life you want? Is there something regularly? Is there a way you think? Is there a way you think or approach? I know you talk about personal board of directors, having input but how do you approach in your mind creating a bigger canvas for yourself to make an impact in the world? I don't know if that makes sense. Is there a certain line of thinking you follow? Is there a certain belief system?
Yeah.
Because I've seen you from Microsoft days, right? So there is a certain thought process which I can't pinpoint it, but I can feel leads to you having the portfolio that you have.
Yeah, I didn't set out with an intention to have a bigger and bigger canvas. That is, the consequence may have been a consequence, but it wasn't the intent. My intent is, look, I want to follow my curiosity and my passion. And in order to do that, as I did these experiments, and it led to the things I did. So I would say that was one trigger. The second is, I wanted to be much more in control of my time. The one thing I really didn't appreciate at Microsoft was I was on this treadmill and somebody else was controlling the speed. Okay. And I refused to live my life like a hamster, all my life. So I said, I need freedom, and I'm willing to trade off other benefits for that. So this freedom of time, optimizing time was the second principle. The third one is, look, I said every few years, and when I retrospectively look, it turns out to be every 7 years. I end up walking away from whatever I've done and taking on a completely new challenge, and I'm doing that right now with climate change and energy. And a lot of people wouldn't do that, and their reasons like, I'm afraid to fail, or I'm afraid to give up all the goodies I have here. And so you tend to hold on, and then you're stuck with the canvas you have. So so that's how I'd respond to it. So Amrish, I can't believe.
Thank you.
So many good people here. Hey, Amrish.
Yeah, a lot of people you're groomed.
I didn't groom. My lives were intertwined. That's all.
Sonal and then Amrish both have questions. Sonal, go ahead, and we can maybe take the questions and then
Sure. Thank you, Ravi. It's a really insightful conversation. I'm sorry I haven't yet read your book, so I will once I receive it. But so when we talk about employees, we are generally talking about the need to recognize them, to show empathy, and acknowledge them. And somehow, when we're talking about leaders, looking for recognition and appreciation almost seems like the wrong thing for a leader to do. It's never talked about that way. And we never talk about that transition, because we all grew up, isn't it, from being an employee to now needing to be the son that nobody else powers, you power yourself. What are your thoughts on that?
Superb question. It's a superb question. So, I look at myself. I think from childhood, I was conditioned to please in order to receive recognition and reward. So you do this, mom's happy. You don't do this, she holds her love back. Okay. Same thing at school with the teacher. And then you move on to work. Then your manager does the same thing. You please the manager, life is good. Don't please. So for some 45 years of my life, I was living in this mode of pleasing. And so I got addicted to recognition. Okay. And so when I branched off Sonal to do my own things, one of the things I miss the most, I'd say it's more than heroin, is this appreciation, recognition, and all that. Gradually over the years, you learn to you get recognition, you get your appreciation, but you get it from different people. Okay. So for instance, I don't wait on January 25th to see if I've got a Padma Award. Okay, I'm not going to get it. I've been critical enough. I've not done anything important enough. So I don't look for it there. I don't look for appreciation from the people in the Economic Times Awards. I get my tons of appreciation and recognition from forums like this. Okay, the people who read my book and say, look, this has just been incredibly useful to me, and they say that on LinkedIn. I get my jollies from that, for instance, or my work with schools and the kids and the teachers. So I think you need to sort of shut off your need for appreciation from people in positions of power and learn to take it from everywhere. And as you do good work, you're going to get just an abundance. It just won't be from the old crowd. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I guess that's also a conscious journey, isn't it? Then.
Yeah, it is. And it's not comfortable. Okay, Amresh.
Amresh, go ahead.
Hey, Ravi, great to see you. Great thoughts, as always. So maybe it's my midlife crisis or whatever it may be, but I actually, my hypothesis is that India requires help at two levels, right? We keep talking about bottom of pyramid and SMEs and so on, but I think the more urgent need in India is actually to build the leadership skills. When I say leadership, it's not just people leadership, right? It's thought leadership, the ability to disrupt, right? And we can, when I look at all the new age or even the old age companies here, most of them are Me Too models, even the new unicorns, B2B, AI. My assertion would be that all of them are Me Too. When I was at Microsoft, I used to work with a lot of startups. Whenever I look at buying something here, the immediate reaction from someone in Redmond, or even my own reaction, is I can find 5 in Israel and 10 in the Valley that do the same thing and maybe even more. So why do you think this is? I mean, what do you think we can do to help build? Is it failure at the academic level? We're not building those skills, or is it something more than that? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah.
Another wonderful question. And I would say, look at cricket, right? So India's been playing cricket for a long time, and we were mediocre and uneven. And then something happens, and suddenly we're, at the top, consistently at the top in any format of the game. And I think there are a couple of things that change this. I'm no cricketer, but I do like just to see these things happening in different fields. One of them is the pool of talent that was coming in became much wider. Okay, as non-English speaking, dusty kids from all parts of the country, got onto muddy, sort of make-believe cricket pitches, and I think the pool of talent vastly increased, and people like Dhoni started coming up instead of just the elite English-speaking varieties. Okay, and the second thing that happened is, as you win, the mindset changes. You see, you get new role models of success that inspires you, and you see that it's what's possible, and your mind opens up. And so I think the same evolution is happening slowly, but very slowly in the startup world, the world of ideas. But if we really want to accelerate that, we have to get many, many, many more people inventing, many, many, many more people building different types of businesses. And I suspect that broadening of the pool is what will throw up many, many more interesting and disruptive ideas. That's my sense. But by the way, this is one of the less important problems for facing India. I think the tearing of the social fabric is just profoundly more important. And us going back to embracing oligarchic capitalism versus entrepreneurial capitalism is way more dangerous.
Yep. Thanks, Ravi.
Thanks, Ravi. I had one final question for you before we let you go. So all the business leaders here, they've done 20, 30 years of work and they have a lot to say. How should one go about writing a book?
I don't think you should write a book.
Okay.
This is a mug's game. So, yeah, but look, if I try and answer that question more constructively, yeah, I think the first thing is to get into the habit of talking about your ideas. I don't think you can just, from whatever you're doing today, suddenly go and write a book. And the world doesn't need another book, okay? You're just going to kill more trees. The world does, very much need good books with good ideas. So start with the ideas, find different ways of putting them out there, podcasts, little talks in forums like these, posts on LinkedIn, whatever, different forums, put your ideas out there and start developing your voice, start building followership. And then as you go down that path, if you think there's value in organizing everything into a framework, and that framework is best represented in a book, you can naturally evolve to that. But I'd say you need to go down this path first of getting your ideas out and putting yourself out there in smaller formats. So yeah, it sounds like you're planning a book, Pari.
No, I'm not planning a book, but I've asked about the rest of the people who have a lot of things to say. And Ram had a question, I think. Maybe we'll take your old team member. Ram, do you want to go?
No, Pari, sorry, it was an accident, but anyway, Ravi, thanks so much. You referenced to me a couple of times, but I also will have to say that, you talked about taking big bets on people. And I would say that I have been a beneficiary of that big bet. I remember the breakfast meeting where you offered me a job in Redmond, and I moved in 6 weeks. I relocated from the US to India in 6 weeks to be a chief of staff at Microsoft. And I think that was a huge opportunity. And thanks again for taking a flyer on me.
Yeah, well, half my bets have been wrong. With you, I got lucky.
Thank you.
So, I'm the lucky beneficiary of that decision. Hey, so thanks, Pari. It looks like we've run out of time, but I'm glad that you invited us for this session. And thank you for sending out a few copies. By the way, if you didn't get one from Pari, it's perfectly okay to go to Amazon or some other place and get it. And if you find it somewhat useful and interesting, do spread the word. And I'm always there in case you want to continue the chat and chat offline. Okay.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks a lot for your time. We greatly enjoyed the session.
Bye-bye.